Okay, there it starts. Well, hello, folks. Glad to see you guys. It looks like that we've got kind of a group here where we kind of know each other. We've all been around together, and that's what forms Sangha. They become familiar with one another. Familiarity, actually, the word familiar is the same root word as family, that we're familiar with our family. So, learning each other and the things about each other is very, very helpful within the practice, which we've talked about before. This is all about the issue of Sangha. And I'm really pleased to see you guys seeing each other over and over and over again, because that um, creates that sense of belonging.
What's
Uh,
better, family or fellowship?
it's the same thing, isn't it?
Ah,
It's all the same thing. And that is how you feel about each other is the same way that you feel about yourself, all gushy and warm and happy.
mm-hmm.
Ah, Kimasitu, welcome. Glad to see you.
Hello, Kansai. Hello.
Okay. So, um, Alex asked a question on the other day, and my flippant answer was watch closely now. Now that comes out of a Star Is Born movie out of the 1970s, and it's a when I heard it, I was already deep into the Dhamma, and so it caught me to watch closely now, because that's in fact that's the entire teaching of the Buddha right there. But Alex then asks the question, well, watch what? And I thought I'd covered that so many times. and it may be then that we need to look at it from a different perspective of what is it that's worth watching? What is it that's worth paying attention to? Because in fact, the Mahasi method, they say, well, note, and the student says, well, note what? And the teacher will say, well, note whatever there is, which is actually correct in this the state of one by one as they occur. Um, but you can imagine that some of the things as they come by are worth really noting, and that if we have a plan or a map, or let us say a group of items to look for. I guess an example would be that from time to time, the customs agents are giving a list of things to look for, because that's the word on the street that a whole bunch of this stuff is coming in, and so be on alert to watch for that kind of stuff. And so we can actually do that with the Dhamma, that in fact all of the instructions for it are laid out, but they're not laid out in this particular expression of what is it that we watch for, or what is worthy of us watching. And so we can go then into the Eightfold Noble Path and immediately go for right, noble looking Sama area Ditti, because that's exactly what we're talking about. If the waking up and the watching is noble, then that means that we know what we're going to be looking for. And in that regard, we're going to be looking for whether this thought is wholesome or not wholesome. Is this thought wholesome or is it not wholesome? And then we take the effort to change it into wholesome. This is a very, very easy procedure. And watch closely now means to watch closely for dukkha. Get really good at judging whether a thought is worth having or not, because you can do better than that. And so we do better than that. And then we celebrate, hey, I can do better than that. But there's also other ways of looking that, in fact, this kind of stuff may help in the sense of what kind of thought is it? That that one of the things that we make a mistake on is by thinking that only thought, or what is, in fact, this is what we can do, is we can actually define what is thought, because thought has several different working definitions, and in fact the better working condition would be, well, it's all of them things one by one as they occur. And so one of the kind of thoughts that we have is repetitive reciting things over and over and over again. Sometimes it's a tune, sometimes it's an old memory, sometimes it's a ritual, and sometimes it's a set of rules. But we have a whole lot of repetitive stuff that is actually in the form of discord or language because it's already pre-constructed. So this is one of the kinds of forms that we have. And in fact, in Sutta number 9, in the right view, the sutta, right view, Samaditi Sutta, number 9 in the Majjhima Nikaya, when he's talking about the sankharas, he's actually talking about it in three ways. We have bodily sankhara, verbal sankhara, and citta sankhara. Now, that verbal sankhara is what we're getting at here, the sankhara that comes in the form of language. It comes in the form of you telling yourself stuff. It's in the form of the way that we would write stuff down is we talk to ourselves about it before we write it down. And that's one of the kind of thoughts that we have. And these are easy, fairly easy to spot. And then you can check that out. Yes, that's that kind of thought. But then there are other kind of thoughts that are not so obvious because we haven't been paying attention to them. And that would be visual thoughts. Now, in fact, there is every good reason to talk about applied in the same and sustained thought because of the language of the Pali. One, the applied is the same root word is vision, and then the sustained thought has the same root word as voice, vakavicha, okay? So we can actually use this and twist it around to say that basically there are two kinds of thought. One of them is a very quick applying of the mind into a vision. Often that is a vision of the past. It's a real vision. It's just not stored well and not retrieved well, but it's something like what happened. Sort of like a television image is something like what the camera saw. And then that happens really quickly, and then the mind will tell a story about that vision. Or if you're going to tell someone else about that thought, that vision that you had, idea we often call it, which is often a visual thing. We have an idea that, in fact, in the 1940s and so, when they did comics in the newspaper, they would reference having an idea as having a light bulb go off.
Okay, already down the rabbit hole.
Right. We see the light. Okay, the vision is there. It flashes in. And then we continue down the rabbit hole into telling ourselves a story about it. So this is what in NLP it's referred to as see here. We see something, and then we talk to ourselves about it. This is a very common kind of thought. But most of us, when we're starting in our practice of Anapanasati, we can only begin to catch on to the fact that I've got a dialogue, or I've got this monologue, or I've got this speech that's going on inside my head, and I don't recognize, well, what was it that triggered that? What kind of thought preceded that long verbal, oftentimes complicated concept?
That's also a kind of RAS, right?
What is RAF?
A reticular activation system.
Okay, the neurologist have found the darn thing. Great. The Buddha found it 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. That connection that we have that trigger us into these discursive thoughts. And it's often been the discursive thoughts themselves that are unwholesome, to where the visual imagery may not be. In fact, it's kind of neutral. And then there is the other kind of thinking that Goenka tries to get people to experience by using the method that he used, and that is start paying attention to the body. What we mean by paying attention to the body means literally to spend mind moments with the mind focused on the body as it moves around. And then we can even go so far as to use the word think about the body. That in fact, what is a thought other than how do we spend a mind moment? And what is a mind moment would be that thought. And so if we are actually paying attention and watching what's going on, we begin to see each thought as they occur one by one, but normally we don't. But in fact, it's a good point to talk about sati as a skill that is being developed. Now, the first kind of sati and the first kind of skill is to remember to practice. Remember to sit down and look. Okay. The next one would be how powerful is the sati? Does it help the effort? That in fact, when sati is strong, the effort is easier, but when there's very weak sati, it takes a lot of effort to do anything. And so that waking up process, bringing us right up into a powerful state of really, really willing to look and see what's there, is a second kind of sati, and that's a skill that needs to be developed. So how often we do it, and then how strong it is, and now the third aspect of it is how fast is it? Can you begin to get it down to this mind moment level so you can begin to watch what's going on, including
strong or balanced?
Okay, balanced. That's balanced. Strong. As opposed to wishy-washy and unbalanced, etc. So yes, I'm quite willing to make that change. We can talk about it in the sense that we can remain balanced, because we become unbalanced. In fact, when we see the dukkha, that's the thing that every meditation student has to deal with, is that when we begin to practice and we begin to see dukkha, the first thing we do is that we really wallow in it. It's like the waking up is not strong enough waking up to actually make the change. So in fact, we can say, like for instance, Goenka says, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. This is what he's referring to. Never mind that you saw the dukkha, that you were off someplace else. Just come back and watch the breath. And every student comes to, when the mind wanders away from the breath, holy crap, what's going on here? I thought I could control my mind, and here I can't watch the breath. There must be something wrong with this meditation. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, poor me. And you can see the kind of dukkha that we will create because we found something about our own minds that we didn't like. Rather than having that, oh, there now. Hey, I can see that the mind needs a little developing here. that sure I began to come out of diapers and wear big boy pants with the body. Let me come out of the diapers of the mind and let it grow up too. Let's not wallow in our self-pity. Let's make an improvement. And this is the quality of the sati, of that waking up, because if we only halfway wake up to the dukkha, we don't see it as dukkha. We only wake up enough to see that it's dukkha, but not enough to say, holy crap, I got to get out of this. Let me out of
So
here.
attitude?
That comes around exactly. In fact, the budding of the attitude, or the very seed of the attitude, is what we're talking about now, is that ability to have a strong sati, that it needs to be developed. And when it's fully developed, it's developed into an attitude of, hey, I can handle this. Doesn't matter what kind of crap my mind comes into, I can come right back out of it. Got that one. Okay. So you're right. It's all the same thing. So with this sati being strong and fast, we now can apply that to the looking. Right noble looking. I know that it's said right noble view, and in the English language, the word view is often assumed to be a noun, to where we're looking at it as a verb. Looking, right noble investigating, watching right now what's happening. Let's see what's going right through there. Paying attention to as many different things as we can. So we kind of flitter around, but there is a continuous thread in there. And that continuous thread is that we're keeping all of this stuff connected. And what is the connection? The sati, to remember to keep this stuff going, to remember to keep looking. Or as the phrase goes, watch closely now. So that watch closely, that quality of watching closely, has the quality of the strong sati, the fast sati, so that we can really look at what the mind is doing and see these various kinds of thoughts, whether it's a feeling thought or a sensational thought or an observational thought. That's another one. Now, what is an observational thought? Well, when you look at something and you don't know what it is, you keep looking at it, you're spending mind moments actually observing, bringing in data. You're observing something. This is actually real consciousness. And that it's actually a good practice to continue to do that. In other words, let's get pretty good at understanding what observational thought patterns are and practice them. To practice, because really this is in the here now. To practice observational thoughts means to remember to look, remember to hear, remember to experience what the body is doing. And so the whole idea of the observational thought is that it does then encompass all of the senses. But the primary way of looking at observational thought would be, because of the way that we primarily experience the world, would be through our eyes and through our ears. But the one that we're really going to start practicing and bringing up, because in our society we don't pay much attention. Now, there are some professions that do pay attention to the body and to the feelings. Actors pay attention to feelings. Dancers pay attention to the body. Many sports people pay attention to the body. Composers pay attention to the feelings. But we're talking about a very, very minor part of the society, like down at 1%, that can gain these values. And so here we practice them actually in Anapanasati to actually develop being able to being sensory alive. It's almost like you become a part of the surroundings that you're in. You don't have to see it, and you don't have to hear it to know that it's there. In other words, arahats and high quality monks, they're really hard to sneak up on because they know that you're there. It's almost the same way as a karate master. karate masters are the ones who've got this stuff really developed so that you can't jump off a roof on top of them. They're going to know that you're in the air and they're going to let you land in a splat. Okay, so this is the whole thing that we're looking at then, is that sensory awareness of being around and in an environment. To be literally in your senses means to literally be alive. And this needs to be practiced. And it's one of the ways of spending mind moments that actually most people understand after they practice this far superior to having thoughts of discursive language, constantly talking to ourselves. And so begin to look at how you spend your time. What kind of mind moments? That's the whole quality here of watch closely now. Doesn't mean to listen to the thoughts. It means to notice that this is a thought. Yes, Laurent, go ahead.
Yes, well, I think you were saying that, but there is a difference between having wholesome thoughts, like saying now everything is okay, and hearing that and paying attention to that, from just maybe listening to every sound around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wholesome state or thought, right?
Exactly so. Exactly. Okay. But in fact, one of the things that I can see that many students will get misled with when I talk about changing the mind by gladdening the mind or by making the mind thoughts wholesome, they hear me as, oh, well, we need to change our language. All we have to do is change the language that we are using in our discursive thoughts, and then everything will be wholesome. But that's not the whole show. That's not the whole story. But in fact, we need to look at a whole lot of other stuff, but we got to start someplace. That this is the very, very first place to start to watch. But as we gain that skill of being able to watch closely, that's when we take these other things into consideration, prioritize them, etc., like that. I mean, where are you going with this? You've heard me say many times that go and experiment with and find out how you want to feel, and then let yourself feel that way. Okay? So now we can do the same thing with mind moments. Find out what kind of ways do you want to spend your mind moments, awake or asleep, in misery and suffering, talking to yourself, telling yourself to do this, that, and the other thing? Or do you want to spend your mind moments observing the reality that we live in to the point that we become kind of at one with it? And these things should need to be played with, because in that way, being one with everything means that we've got to go find all those constituent components and begin to bring them together. What are the constituent components? Well, it's the ear door, the eye door, the sense door, so that you can move fluidly from one sense to the next. I'm not saying to do it all at the same time exactly, because at the same time exactly is a time frame reference anyway. So what are we talking about? The nanosecond range? Nah. The 10th of a second range? Nah. Within the 1 second range? Absolutely. Yes. Within 1 second period of time, we can pay a whole lot of attention to a whole lot of different things. We can let the mind go fluid, which basically means that we can spend one mind cycle, which would be about, it's about the same as an alpha wave, about 1/10 of a second. Can range down to 7, can go up to about 14, but we're talking about that frequency range. Very, very low frequency, below hearing, by the way, for most. But some of them can hear the hearing so low, especially those who played tuba, can hear their own mind humming along. So in this mind cycle, we can move that mind cycle from one thing to another. In fact, we actually do it, but we're not aware that we're doing that. The example that I gave is one mind moment or one mind cycle of having an image, followed then by 9 mind moment cycles of the rest of the second telling ourselves a story about what we just saw. Or we can have 3 or 4 images mixed in with the story to give a more complete story. And so we mix the images in. Here's an example of that. I went home from school one day and my mommy was not home. So I climbed into my treehouse waiting for her to come home. And somehow or another, I don't remember how exactly, but I did fall out of that treehouse. And on the way down, I was able to grab the swing, but this swing was not a rope swing. It was a chain swing. And because of the chain, it scratched the whole inside of my arm, okay? And this happened when I was 6. But what I remember having on my mind when that was happening as I was falling is, where's my mommy? So if you go back and you look, you can see that that's the kind of things that happen is that we have several images mixed in there with verbal stuff, and this is how we store our data. And so now we can watch how we're actually storing that.
And that's just simple stuff.
Yes, but it's really worth watching closely for, so that we can begin to actually see how the mind works. That's why I was talking about watch closely now means to develop the sati and develop the ability to look, so that when you're having a visual image, you know it's a visual image as opposed to having a conversation about it. In other words, when you think about writing your boss an email, do you see a visualization of your screen, or do you just start talking as if you were writing? So these are kind of things. Here's another example of how to pay attention to this. This is actually a skill that can be developed, but very, very few people have it. And that is, you take something that you like to read. It may be something simple or it might be complicated. That's not the point. But whatever you would like to read, you get that on the screen ready for reading. And then you go find some dialogue or an audio book or something to play that's sound. And you get that going and you start listening to it. And as soon as you get the idea of what they're talking about, go back to the visual thing and now try to read what is on the screen and listen to what's being said. Is your mind fast enough to move back and forth between the two of them so that you can get a pace going? Or are you going to get stuck in the audio and forget about reading? But the dangerous part, you see, that's the easy one. The dangerous one is to get stuck in the visualization and let the audio roll by, and you've missed it unless you go physically back up to do something about it. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that you can use to examine your own mind. And these are also games that we can play or toys to play with. Allow your mind to become the most beautiful, wonderful, magic new gadget that you ever had. And it's really worth playing with so that you can start watching how it works. What are these visual images that we store? And then when we bring visual images back, do we actually recreate them, or are they already published, ready for distribution? In other words, begin to recognize that a lot of the visualizations that we have are actually constructive, not ready-made, that we don't remember exactly what it was, and so we kind of fill in the details. And we do that quite often. And then we'll restore the modified version, and then we'll bring that back. And then we'll touch it up and use it in a moment, and then we'll store it again. And then when we bring it back again, we'll touch it up again. So watch it for the fact that you might, in fact, be touching up your memories, that things didn't happen the way that you remember them, that we're going through this touch-up process. This reminds me, by the way, of very, very old, expensive art. that one generation after another complains about the last generation's restoration work because those guys screwed up the Mona Lisa, not fixing it. If they'd have left it bad, I would have fixed it better. But then the next generation is going to say the same thing about me. Okay, so that's an example of it, is when we try to restore images to bring it back to where they're useful, we often change them so that it's not exactly the way that it was. And you can see people in arguments all the time. In fact, there's a song out of Gigi, the movie, to where this old couple who have been away from each other for many years are coming back and reminiscing and having a song. And the guy says, I remember how you were dressed. You were dressed in blue. And she says, I was in red. And then it goes the whole song that way to the point that they couldn't have possibly been on the same date because their memories of it were completely different.
Classic.
And yet, yes, it's classic, isn't it? That we don't remember things very well. So begin to recognize that the memories, these images, these things that pop into the mind may not be up to the quality. And here you go decorating things and trying to make sense out of it rather than leaving it the way that it was originally. This is, in fact, the part that I'm talking about of the see, then speak. We see it and we tell our story, and the story embellishes the image rather than remembering the image, and just let the image be. Can you come back and just see that image? Maybe, in fact, the first version of it can actually be improved by focusing on those images rather than going through the idea of telling a story about it. And that's especially true with the images of what we actually see with the eyes in this present moment, is to just look and just keep looking and just keep looking and stop telling ourselves stories about what we're seeing. Just be open. And that way we receive a whole lot more data. So this is another way of watch closely now, because what that means in this respect is that mostly we watch and then we storify, and then we modify, and then we watch
Are
again.
there more?
Pardon?
Are there more angles than the aggregates? Mm.
Well, that's enough to get started on now, isn't it?
Alrighty.
Yes, because it's with the aggregates, especially the sankhara, or these memories that we come up with that are visualizations, are then modified and pasted together through perception so that they come up with this new thing that's called the salayatana, which is like the internal television that we play, or the internal screen for the visual images, etc., like that. And so that's an interesting question to ask oneself, is that when I see something out of the past, or when I imagine something that ought to be, how do I do that? Upon what screen do I paint this image? Hi, Martin, you got a friend. So you're right, Veda, and this is just another aspect of that watch closely now, to begin to experience, to start watching what the mind is doing. But the way that we begin to develop the skills to do that, and the place that I always start off the students with it, is at least examine the discursive thoughts to figure out whether this is wholesome or not, and make a change to it. Because we're actually practicing that right noble effort to make a change to the wholesome. But in this conversation, we're talking about watching even more closely than that and start seeing how the mind actually constructs the stuff. And that all I can do is give kind of a map that the Buddha gave, but the territory is for you to explore. You got to go find this stuff out, and it's really worth the trip to begin to do that exploration of how the mind works, and know in the process of it that you've got tremendous amount of control that you didn't know you had before.
The change between seclusion and marketplace. Could you combine that a little bit with this topic?
What I'm talking about here is like introductory practice, best done alone so that you can get fairly good at it. But the place you're going to need it most is out there in the marketplace. An example of that is, how in the heck did you wind up in the marketplace? Now think about that. Do you know how you came out of seclusion, and what thought processes and what desires and what feelings and what sensations and all of that wound you up in the marketplace? Because it's not in a tenth of a second. That takes, minutes at least. Whole lot of mind
Exactly.
Are you watching while all of that happens? That's the whole thing. I'm not saying to stay out of the marketplace, but the better thing to do in this regard is to keep the marketplace out of the mind, because if the marketplace is out of the mind, then you're unlikely to find your body there. That the mind is the forerunner. You thought about the marketplace before you ever got there. And so what were those thoughts? Those are the thoughts that needed to be examined right then and there. And that's where we need to really, really practice is. This is actually the reason why I give the students, and it's time to renew it, I think, so that people can remember that this practice is there. And I call it the chair. I'm not talking about the third chair, the empty chair of the psychologist, especially Fritz Perls, but rather the chair that you're in right now. The chair is actually an excellent meditation object. Why? Because if the chair is there and you're using the chair the way that the chair should be used, then you're feeling safe, secure, and comfortable in that chair. So why would you possibly want to get up and get out of it? And so the practice then is that every time that you get up out of your chair, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 times a day, depends upon your lifestyle or whatever, but if you start practicing this, you'll also start to keep track of how often you get up. But every time that you get up, you don't get up walking. We often go from the sitting posture to the walking posture. What we're going to do is intentionally remember to practice standing up. So we're from sitting to standing, maybe long enough to take a breath and a time to do some reflection. And then we start walking. And I've had many students say, oh, when I was practicing this, I'd take 10 steps and then I would remember. And the answer to that is, okay, 10 steps later, you remember to do it, stop then. And when we stop, what are we going to do? We're going to stop and reflect. Why did I get out of my chair? It was comfortable, it was safe, it was secure, and here I am out in danger, walking around where either a neighbor or a car or a dog could hit me. And so let's start looking at this. Why did we get up? Did I get up to go to the bathroom? Doesn't matter why you got up. And I'm not making any rules, and I'm not inviting you to make any rules. I'm asking you instead to observe. Why did you get up? Because this is something that, in fact, is a kind of an intermediate to that answer of yours about the marketplace. Because you cannot go to the marketplace until you get up out of your chair. And so why did you think about going out of the marketplace? I mean, you don't have to think about the marketplace, but you thought of something. So let us say that after a few certain events that happen, you wind up in the marketplace. Well, how did getting up out of the chair get you to the marketplace? Watch closely now. Start observing what your mind is doing. Start making some changes. Like, in fact, a really good change was after you stand up and you reflect for a second, you can say, hey, I can sit back down for a while, and we just sit back down. Don't have to go because we got up. We can reflect and remember that, it's not really worth going down to 7-Eleven right now. I can just postpone that trip. Don't really have to go anywhere. So, in fact, this is the kind of karma that we've talked about before that brings the end of the karma. Action that leads to the end of action. What is that? The action that leads to the end of action is here the reflection upon why are we acting? Where are we going? What are we doing? Why are we doing this kind of stuff? When in fact I could just be here now and observe the reality of the situation. I don't really have to go anyplace. And then sometimes we really got to go. There really is things to do. And so we reflect upon that and says, hot diggity dog, I'm on my way. But then the next one would be coming back to the chair to sit back down, because this is also an opportunity to practice. And what is that? Well, why would you bother to sit down? To relax, take a load off. Maybe you're a little bit tired when standing and walking. And so it's quite natural for us to sit down and take it easy. So this is actually an opportunity for us to also include the rest of the Satipatthana and let the mind take a rest. That in fact, sitting down now should be the anchor for going back and starting up the Eightfold Noble Path, right here and there. All as we sit down, we take a breath, we relax, and we start looking at these discursive thoughts, because you're probably going to be pretty full of discursive thoughts by the time that you've walked all over the place and come back to sit down, so the mind is pretty active right now. So take a look at these discursive thoughts and recognize, is this one wholesome? Is this one wholesome? Was it a good thing that I got up and left my chair for whatever time and then came back, and am I satisfied? Or am I still grumpy because of what happened out there? And so come back and sit in the chair and get your mojo, get your equilibrium, get your mind back together, get your wholesome thoughts operating. So this is the exercise of the chair, and that exercise, by the way, Veda, is strongly linked to that question of the marketplace that you ask. And I assume by the marketplace, most people mean the job. And yet most of the people, when they're sitting in a chair, they're sitting there at their job. And so this is the time and place to practice with this chair. And I
mean everything that's moving, basically inside and outside.
Right. Yeah, take a look. Watch closely now. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. But we have to start looking for something someplace. Here's actually a point to be made about this, and that is that with various different meditation systems and practices, one of the differences upon all of these meditation practices is what object are you going to take? Like with Goenka, they take the body. With Vajrayana, they take a choiceless awareness. With the Zen, it's just sitting. With various psychologies, they take various aspects. With the Mahasi, they take the mind in a certain way. And they talk about it in the sense that the object of the meditation is important. And that defines the meditation that we're doing. Other examples would be like the Kasina meditations and fire meditations and water meditation. All of these kind of various meditations have the issue of what is your object. In fact, you can say I am a fire meditator, exactly. Or we identify with it also. And we identify with that particular object as if that object is a good object to take. And what we're doing actually with Anapanasati is that we are developing the skill of taking and holding an object. That's the skill we're developing, is to be able to see it, to be able to grasp hold of it, to take that object. And to now we've got a long, long list of objects to take. It's almost like trying to learn to play the piano, and the first lesson you get is the note C, and the teacher says, "Here's letter C. This is your note." Huh? How long is it going to take you to learn to play the piano? You don't even get a D until next week. And so the way that we're actually playing is, in a sense, a real life way. We can't go into the meditation hall, for instance, and bring just the body in there and leave the mind, the feelings, and the mind's objects in the bed. That we got to bring the whole show with us, okay? Which means that no matter which sense where it's coming from, or how we relate to whatever that trigger was, or whatever it was that impacted that got that cycle going, that's an object for us to take as meditation when and if it occurs. In other words,
de-artificialize our modes.
Pardon?
De-artificializing our modes of experience. And
Exactly.
Control and responsibility and ability.
To come out of our constructed reality, often pre-constructed, into experience of what reality is as best we can, right here, right now, without having to concoct or add much of anything to it. But that's a process. It doesn't happen immediately. You can't give beginning students that instruction. or they'll go talk to somebody who will get you locked up. That's woo-woo land. But we can't. But there is a place to start. And that place to start is to look at these discursive thoughts as wholesome or not wholesome, and then change them so that we begin to have one wholesome thought after another after another. That's an excellent skill to develop. But today's talking is somewhere in the middle there, in that sense of watch closely now, because this is the time when we're actually going to be watching closely enough that we're going to discover new things to pay attention to. And I can't give you a full list because there's too many items out there that are worth looking at whenever they occur. But we can categorize them in the sense of the senses that we have. The sense of the eyes, the sense of the ears, the sense of the body, the sense of touch and taste, and also in the sense of the feelings, and in the sense of the discursive thoughts that we're having, as well as all of the other kind of thoughts. So we have both an inner world and an outer world. And that part of what we're processing here is to make that inner world and the outer world at one with each other. That one of the ways of expressing it is that the farther away our own personal reality is from actual reality, the more dukkha there's going to be. And the closer we are in my own personal reality to actual reality, the less suffering, the less dukkha, the less dissatisfactions are going to be. And we just go around elated all the time because hot diggity dog is just like the way that I thought it would be. Except that the kind of thoughts that we're having is the thoughts about what it actually is being, rather than trying to construct a reality to try to catch up with it. That's another way of talking about it, in fact, that the loser or the victim, or the way that we grow up, when we are born, we're all victims, can't do much of anything. And so a lot of what the little child does is try to pick up from mommy and daddy and store it away without really investigating it. We take on a lot of structure, a lot of rules, a lot of the way things are supposed to be. And then when we're adults, we think that's our personality. That's who we are. And the whole quality of the teachings of the Buddha has to do that, no, understand your personality, and also understand that you are not your personality, because the personality is changing because you're intending to change it. You're intending to look at the personality the way that it is and make some changes to it. Watch closely this personality. Who the heck are you, you say? And the answer to that is a moving target. Yeah, go ahead, Beta.
That also points towards what nowadays certain sciences call resilient people. I mean, if you think about people like what's her name? The young girl that hid from the Nazis in Holland.
Anne Frank? No, she was in
Anne
a
Frank.
camp. Okay.
Yeah. The way she already described what she experienced with the body, the feelings, the mind, and mind objects without knowing about Buddhism. I mean, this is what you would call someone who's pretty resilient, but it's so much more than just the term resilience.
It's the attitude that I'm going to survive this. Even if the thought is I'm going to survive this and this is death itself, we're still going to be okay. We're going to manage. I'm okay. Even if I'm dead, I'm still going to be okay. I don't have to worry about dying because that's a short-term kind of thing, and I can handle that too, and I can handle it happily. So but
Exactly.
You, like Anne Frank, have to go through literally hell in order to come to that. Look at that hell I went through. If I can handle that hell, I can handle anything. But in fact, this is what within the Mahasi method in the 16 Statues of Insight, this is what the dark night of the soul is really all about, is to give the meditation student rock bottom and let him crawl his way out of his own hole. And when he does, he stands at the top and says, "Look what I did. I climbed out of that hole I dug for myself."
Big time.
And so this is actually, we don't have to do so much digging. We're going to stand on a really, really small pile of dirt and take control of that. We don't have to dig a deep pit in order to feel like that we can handle things. And so that's the difference between the Anapanasati method and the Mahasi method. Is the Mahasi method actually puts the students through a boot camp. Then, in fact, military boot camp performs the same service.
Yeah,
it's the same service. Let's knock the boy out of that kid and put some mojo in, put some yes sir into that. Whether he's the first day, yes sir, yes sir,
major pain.
right. And well, they've got that term of no pain, no gain. And the answer to that is, yeah, the Buddha's got a method. We can do a whole lot of gaining with a whole lot of no paining. That's what makes the real practice so valuable, is you don't have to go through all of that pain. That in fact, you've already gone through enough already. Give yourself a break.
Don't feel guilty to be lazy.
Well, hello, Gary. Good to see you.
Hello everybody. Hi.
Yes, Gary and I have been talking off on Skype from time to time. I'm really glad to see you join the call. We were just talking about the phrase "watch closely" now, and I've been giving a whole lot of different meditation objects that refers to, which best can be understood as, when we're practicing, watch that we're practicing. Look at what kind of thoughts, that we're having thoughts instead of just having thoughts. So these are my thoughts, they're pleasant or unpleasant or whatever like that. No, let's look at those thoughts. What the heck is that? What process does this thought have? How did I construct this thought? If it's a visual image, where did that come from? Did I make it up? Am I improving it? Etc. like that. So this is the real intermediate stage of the practice, is to really get in touch with how your mind actually works. Recognize that you don't live in a real reality, that we live in a constructed reality, and that we use the past to construct that. But we can, in fact, through knowledge of this, change, so that we can, in fact, begin to live in present moment, in reality, in the senses, in the be here now. And it's quite nice, guys. You ought to try it sometime. So, does anybody have any questions about this topic? Watch closely now. Martin, you've got a friend. Introduce, please.
Demande de présenter. That's my wife, Sandra.
What's her name?
Sandra. Oh, yeah.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Good.
Hello, everybody.
I really
My name
haven't. Go ahead,
no.
please.
Sorry. My name is Sandra.
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 Sandra. Sorry for my English is bad.
Oh, I wouldn't bother with that. That's not a problem. I'm deaf, but that's a bigger problem.
Il est sourd.
Okay. Well, but I don't understand all.
Oh, okay. Sorry for speaking so fast. I'm known to speak too slow
no.
for some people and too fast for others.
No problem. I understand. Non, je comprends. J'apprends.
Mhm.
I learn. Voilà. I learn.
Well, I'm really glad that you're online with us. Welcome.
Me too. Thank you.
Yasin, do you have any questions or anything to say?
For the moment, good. It's all good.
It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything is good.
Well, it's really good to see you coming in and out, Kimasi, too. I'm glad to see you. Are you at Wat Mahatat in Bangkok now?
I am here. For cutting out.
I'm having trouble hearing. Sorry about that.
Technical difficulties.
Yes. So, does anybody have any final comments? Anything to say? Any questions? Veda wins the grand championship for questions.
So much weight.
All right, well, I thought I might try something on you, and it probably will not be, it's probably not as well thought out as it should be before I run it past you. But there was some mention, I think probably on one of your earlier YouTubes or podcasts of Majjhima Nikaya 12, The Lion's Roar.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the one. Now, if I can get it up in front of me, I don't know if you can still see me or hear me when I'm. This happens when some guy called Sunakata, son of the Lichavis, says the recluse Gautama doesn't have any superhuman states, distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. The recluse Gautama teaches a Dhamma merely hammered out by reasoning, following his own line of inquiry as it occurs to him. And when he teaches the Dhamma to anyone, it leads him, when he practices it, to the complete destruction of suffering. Fair enough. So the Venerable Sariputta goes along and tells the Buddha about this, and the Buddha says, he's actually praising me. It is a praise of the Tathagata to say when he teaches the Dhamma, etc., practice for the complete destruction of suffering. And then the Buddha goes on to talk about the powers of a Tathagata. And when we get through to like number 18, or
Since there's
versions.
only 12 of them, it's hard to get to number 18. I'm not sure what you mean by number 18 here.
Okay, right. Well,
I
it's
think, in
number
fact, there's
18
only 10.
It's number 18 on a list that's set out in this translation that's up in front of me by Nanamoli Thera and Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Okay.
Right. So,
those numbers didn't exist in the suttas. They added that, and
Sure.
so go ahead, and here's the point. If it's already there,
he's talking about beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. He understands how they pass on, and how, if they do it wrong, if they're ill-conducted in body, speech, and mind, after death, they appear in a state of deprivation, perdition, even in hell. Okay, now,
Okay.
And the good ones get good stuff, and the bad ones get bad stuff. But how do you square that with the whole thing about Sati, the story about Sati, the son of the fisherman, which I can't remember, where Sati gets roundly told off for saying that he has a soul that goes on from life to life?
Exactly. So what we can do then is understand who the audience is and what language is being spoken, versus how did it get into the suttas that way, versus who's doing the translations and what does it mean. Okay. And that you hear the word death and understand it in one way, where in fact it could be meant in another. And so the point that I would make here is that we've already been talking about the comings and goings of the beings within your own mind. Who am I? That's it right there. And when you stop having that thought, you're dead meat to that person.
Okay.
Okay, so and here's the point. We need to go back before we go there. You're way down too far on the list because you haven't read the first item on the list. And in fact, you really haven't even done the preliminary.
I just did read the first item on the list.
No. The first item on the list has to do with karma. That's the first item that's the first item for a Buddha or for a Tathagata, okay, to know that karma or action and the results of action is dependently arisen. That's the important part to remember. And then we can look at the magical ways of hearing some of those later things and understand them, that stuff is really all happening in the present moment, that it's our old stories that we have heard from prior generations and people who believe in all kinds of magical stuff. And so it's easy to take a magical interpretation of the powers of the Buddha. And a better way of saying it then, instead of saying that you know what the Buddha is saying there, at least must be open to the fact that we don't know yet. Maybe when we're in the present moment, like the word Tathagata means, that we'll understand it the way that he means it. The Tathagata actually is Tathagata, Tathagata, which means the one who is in the present moment. So there's a little bit more to that I'd like to do. In fact, let's do this. Let's schedule the lion's roar as something we can talk about on one of these groups. Does everybody kind of agree to do that? Does that sound like a good idea? What is the lion and what does he roar? All right. So let's do that, Gary. Thank you very much for a topic worthy of discussion.
But you still, and I mean, doubt is my thing.
I know. I'm serendipitous about it. It's a psychic ability I have, is to see doubt.
Yeah, but the point is, it's the old story. It's like whenever a clergyman says, "as it were," I say, "Oh, for God's sake, either it were or it weren't. Which were it?" Don't talk up to me in parables. why doesn't the guy say, why does the guy talking about death in such a way that everybody thinks he means physical
No,
death?
not everybody.
No, not everybody.
Ignorant people, but the wise understand it correctly. And not only that, but let me finish that one point that you started, and that is the reason why we speak in parables is because life itself is a parable. Everything is a parable. Okay. The Buddha used analogies and similes. In fact, on one of the sutras, he's got a page of the various similes that we haven't even found in print yet. Okay, so everything is a simile, including words like rebirth and reincarnation. These are all concepts. Nobody's got any handle or clue about what's real. Everything has got into the imagination. It's all imaginary. Trinities and flying gooses and Tinkerbells, it's all imagination. And we have to learn to tell the difference between what's imagination and what's real. And we're not going to find that by reading suttas that were written and translated to people who hadn't figured that out yet.
Well,
the right way to do it is to go look for yourself and see for yourself and figure it out for yourself, so you're not riddled with doubt that you find in the sutras and all the contradictions. Yes, you can find anything. And here's another point. It's called confirmation bias. That normally what people find is what they want to find. And then they cannot find the stuff that they really need to see that doesn't agree with what they already believe. And so that means that they're stuck where they are. And so what we need to do is to investigate. And so that's what I would like to do next time with you with this particular sutta. Or if you're so gung-ho about it, we'll do it between the week. And you can call me and we'll do it and do something else on Sunday.
Well,
but that's a long, complicated thing. There's a whole lot to it. And then, in fact, I don't even want to get into it because there's a statement that's early on in there that the Buddha, where he says, basically, how the heck could people possibly believe this stuff?
well, yes.
Did you see that statement?
That's what happened.
It happens immediately before the Pali phrase Itipiso Bhagava Araha Samma Sambuddho Icha, that whole thing. The immediate paragraph or the immediate line before that is how could people possibly believe this stuff?
I will go looking for that one. Looking for that one. Certainly.
Okay. It's very early in the sutta. It's before he even talks about the lion's roar.
Yeah.
It's right. But the first thing that the guy said was right. The Buddha says that he's trying to complain about me, where in fact he's praising me.
Yes, I got that bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, if you got that, then why do you have to go get confused about all the magic? Because the only thing the Buddha teaches is to come out of suffering. That's what he teaches. And the guy who was complaining wanted magic. He wanted more than that.
But you've got the whole lot. You've got the whole lot, especially the Tibetans with all those funny gods and images and beings.
And you've got it correct when you use the word Tibetan.
Eh?
It's Tibetan. It's cultural Tibetanism.
That's cultural. What about Indians that go in for?
They've got even more culture. Their culture is even more sophisticated. The Tibetans are actually kind of backwards, but don't tell anybody I said that. Okay. But the Thais are also kind of backwards in the sense that their crap is really they've got spirit houses and trees that they put. I mean, there's a whole thing that we can go into about all of the stuff that was that was the belief system called animism in Thailand. just like all the Tibetan stuff that you'll ever hear about is all Tibetan. You very rarely hear about Buddhism. Because why? Because Buddhism is just too ordinary. Nobody cares about that. But let me see those takas. Let me see those bells they ring. Let me see that guy sit under that wet, cold robe and steam it dry. You know, that's the kind of stuff that people are interested in with Tibetan. So, gosh, Gary, I'm really glad you're here. You just came an hour late.
I don't understand that. It's 10 o'clock. Never mind.
It's the same time. Well, actually, here it's 5:19. We started an hour ago at 4 o'clock p.m. on Thai time, and we've been doing it since we started.
Oh, because I am on 10 o'clock. It is now 10:20.
Right. So we started at 9 o'clock for you.
Ah, well, you see, your website says that it's at 10 o'clock.
Time zones change. Sorry about that.
So you're talking about 10 o'clock British summertime, not winter time, GMT.
Okay. Exactly. Okay. And it says it also on there that whenever someone puts something that was specified is Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Daylight Saving Time, and people don't even see that. They read right past it. Why?
Yep.
Confirmation bias. Ha ha. And
That's
there's
an
a clear
assumption.
example of it.
I mean, it's not so much confirmation bias as what I read on the screen.
No.
Give me a break.
Confirmation bias means that what you read on the screen is not what you read on the screen. It's what you think you read on the screen. And what you think you read on the screen is not the same thing as what's actually on the screen. That's why we're here today talking about watch closely now.
Aha. You're saying I didn't watch closely then. Well, you've got me there. Yes.
Okay, Gary. Well, let's do. That's actually a good sutta to do because it's got some interesting things, and we can do a whole lot of magic dispelling there, because that's the source of people who want to believe in magic. But in fact, the whole idea, just one example of clairvoyance. Well, that's what we're talking about. Watch closely now. You can see clearly. But clairvoyance is wound up being magical. Oh, I can see what's happening 30 miles from here or 1,000 miles, or I can see something that happened 10,000 years ago. That's not clairvoyance. That's imagination. Let's learn the difference.
Sure.
Even if the imagination is correct, that's not the point. The point is that it's not clairvoyance, it's imagination. That clairvoyance means to see clearly. Watch closely now.
Well,
wakey,
of course.
Wakey.
The problem is that it's very difficult to know the difference between imagination and fact. I mean, you have to watch closely, as you say. But, I mean, the point is that if I were to see one of these magical beings, I wouldn't have any way of knowing if it was just my overheated imagination or if it was a real being, because
everybody is in that state, and guess what? A lot of them make the wrong choice. Instead of recognizing it's just something they made up or it's something that they imagine, they think it's real. I mean, how many horror movies do we have already? There's 10,000 horror movies that are based upon that one thing. And that is that we want the worst possible thing to happen. To prove our point. What's our point? Life sucks.
Well, yes. I mean, that is a very learned Sankara, isn't it? Because the whole thing. There'll be tears before bedtime. It starts then. You kids don't enjoy yourself too much because
Jesus has got a hell in his back pocket,
Oh yeah, he didn't so much have the hell in his back pocket. It was all the guys who came after who seem to have managed that to work out hell from chucking out the rubbish onto the fire or something. So so you've all got to burn in hell forever.
Well,
because
I've got a joke for you.
yeah.
Yeah, the joke is that there is a Christian and an atheist standing on the street corner having an argument about this.
Mm-hmm.
And the atheist says, there ain't no hell. And the Christian says, the hell there ain't. And just then a Buddhist is walking by and he just torts, hell, you're both in it right now, and walks on by.
Nice one. Yeah.
Yep, that's where hell is the state of mind we're in when we're not watching closely now.
Yeah. It's not hot enough for hell.
Well, when you see when you see the heat that you have is hell enough, then you can cool off. But so long as you say, oh, this is hell, but it's tolerable hell, then you'll put up with it.
Yeah.
Sort of like the frog that's in the hot water. I mean, they put him in when it's cold and then heat it up. If you put him in hot water immediately, he'll jump right back out. But if you put him in cold water and then heat it up slowly, he'll die. Because he cannot recognize the slight increases of the temperature.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to look for, is we're going to turn the heat down intentionally. So that when it starts heating back up again, we can say, hot dog, I see it. I see that. I see that flame. Who struck that match? Okay, so this is the practice that we have, is to come out of these hells that we've been told about. But a lot of us have already gotten the operating system, or the modus of operation is that stuff stinks. Life is hell. Life sucks. Life is shit, and then you die. I like the one, life sucks. You know why life sucks? Life really does suck when we're sucking. Imagine yourself with a great big soda straw. I mean, and you just cannot suck that Mercedes through that soda straw. That's when life sucks. When no matter how hard you suck on something, you can't have it.
That presumably makes you a hungry ghost.
That's exactly right. And there you are, a hungry ghost, can't get no satisfaction. That's why it's labeled that way. And it's a mental state. It's not going to some castle in England and knocking on the wrong doors and listening to the chains run around and think that there's a ghost there. Okay.
If you hear good teachings, Tibetan teachings of the Bardo, they explain it. They explain it directly and transparently if you find a good teacher. But it's like with every system. It's about money. It's about status. It's about this and that and this and that and this and that. And this and that.
All perhaps under the rubric that knowledge is power. And so if the student has no knowledge and the teacher has knowledge, then the student wants something from the teacher, and that makes the teacher powerful.
If you have to build a huge monastery that has so high walls that nobody can enter it, why do you need to protect it? If you have a what, sala? That's a different thing.
Well, if you're talking about those big monasteries in Tibet, they're getting protection from the cold weather. And guess what? It doesn't matter how big your palace is, it's cold.
Yeah, it's not only the weather that's cold.
Oh, now you're talking about the Chinese government.
They elected him with zero opponents, like yesterday or something. I don't know. Xi Jinping again. Yeah. I mean, he seems to be a very good leader.
Well,
Well, he needs to be. He needs to be a good leader. That's what his. That's why he's there. I mean, I could be a good leader, but I don't need to do that. You could be a good leader too, Veda. You just don't need it. You don't need that stuff. Okay, guys.
You said
Well,
something. You
Yeah, go
earlier
ahead.
said something about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, that he was the star of the show. I mean, the only thing I could see coming up in regards to this kind of evaluation was just poor Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Actually, he turned it into a teaching opportunity.
Yeah, I know.
And he
Yeah.
was really good at it. I mean, some of the stuff that he pulled off, I mean, it just took something special to do that. Made a splash. Doing things like telling the king of Thailand to take his helicopter. He didn't say and stuff it, but the king actually volunteered to send his helicopter to Watsu and Milk, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, "I'd rather die here, thank you."
Yeah.
And there's many other things. Many things.
If people wouldn't take those things as an opportunity to fill it with hindrances, that would be very good. Very, very good. I look forward to seeing this world.
Okay. Well, let's do story time next time, along with Sutta number 12. Thank you, Gary. That's a really good point. We can take off into that, because that's a good sutta to use, because it's very, like so many other sutras, it's very, very clear about what the meaning actually is. But then there's all this other stuff that gives people so much doubt because of the way that it's stated. And so we'll do that one. So, see you guys next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kamasito. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Watch closely now. Watch.
Okay. Bye-bye, Dhammarato.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, Martin.